All right, let's do it.
Well, welcome to episode 2 of Two Guys, No Garage.
Back at it.
I'm Tom Rowley. He's Jack Kelly. I'm croaky, so I apologise for that on the audio. So how you been, bro?
What's been good, man. Been reeling from that last podcast. Honestly, been thinking about it nonstop on just what else we could have talked about. One thing that's been, on my mind is if you could have one. I think I keep going back to it. I'm like, is that really the one? It is, but it always changes, right? Just been talking about, what the answers were, all the nuances, all the things that we could have gone into, but of course, trying to keep it from being a, 24-hour podcast. We've only got this limited time, but been good, man. How about yourself?
Well, yeah, I can't complain, mate. Busy, just running around, driving the Golf all over the place. It's now lovely and autumnal around here, so I'm doing a bit of the. There's something to be said for driving and just looking in the rear view and seeing the leaves come up.
Oh man, it's awesome. It's perfect. It is my favorite. Yeah, I can attest to that for sure.
Oh yeah, man, just kind of rocking and rolling with that whole scenario, and just looking forward to doing this, honestly, man. So, should we jump in? Let's see. What do we want to? Has there been anything this week that you've seen that you've been like, oh, that seems to be some kind of big story in the car community or anything like that? Has anything piqued your interest?
I saw a study that Volvo put out, and I shared it to my Instagram story on how EV manufacturing takes 9 years before the car actually becomes carbon neutral and versus petrol produced or manufactured vehicles. And I've said this from the very beginning of time. I think it was the first study was ever done on the Prius when it came out. Actually had a larger carbon footprint than H1s that were manufactured in the United States because the chassis were built in Japan and the batteries were produced in another place, and they get them on a cargo container and they ship them up to Europe to have this piece assembled, then back down to wherever. And it really mapped the Prius assembly across the entire world so that by the time it came in, to the showroom in the United States and was sold, it actually had a larger carbon footprint than an H1 Hummer. And I thought that was kind of a funny metric. And to see Volvo now coming back, 15 years after the, I don't know how long the Prius has been around, but I want to say it's about 15 years, it's telling the same story. I think people overlook it. I think people forget that it takes coal burning to produce electricity, and at what cost and what efficiency rate, and is it really more beneficial? And EVs still require oil. And anyways, I digress. But
no, but I think
it's interesting.
I think it's a good point. I think this point of, are EVs actually good for the environment? And, there's an argument. The simple argument is probably it's a wash at this point in time. Because until all of the electricity that's going into them is produced in such a manner that is completely clean, all solar or wind or whatever, you are still burning coal to power the thing. And burning coal is worse than burning gasoline. There's no two ways about it. The idea of all of these lithium mines and these things that they're making the batteries out of is just, I don't think it's factored, as you say. I don't think people factor that in. People kind of drive around in EVs. I mean, we both were lucky enough at one point in our life to spend some time in California. And everybody drives around like they're the best person in the world. And the reality of the situation is you might be worse than an H1 Hummer, which is kind of crazy. And I do think that as every other auto manufacturer starts ramping up and saying, okay, we're going all electric and things like this, I think a lot of this is going to come out in the wash with regards to what the actual net carbon footprint is of building these things and where you're building them and things like that. So I think it's a good point,
Yeah, no, and it kind of comes full circle to a thought I had. I was dropping Charlie off at daycare, and it's in a nicer part of the city, so lots of money up there, and you see some crazy cars. I mean, I can't tell you, I've probably seen at least 3 different Ferraris in the past week and a half. Saw Maranello, I've seen 360, they might not be the newest, but you see Bentleys and Ferraris and Range Rovers and BMWs and Mercedes and just a whole lot of cars, right?
Yeah.
And I got to thinking, when you define, a car person, right? Like, how is that defined? Because are cars, and the answer is yes, a status symbol for folks. And does that make them a car person? Because anyone with money can go out and buy an M6 or, an Aston Martin or what have you. But to what point are they a car person, or are they just flaunting their money as a status symbol to buy the nicest, newest, shiniest thing versus actually being into the cars that they're buying, right? And so it just got me thinking, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you buy a Ferrari or a Porsche or whatever, are you inherently a car person at that point in time, or did you just have a big enough wallet? And I think the reality is, if you just drive it to daycare and back, and it's a 911 GT3, it's a Enzo, it's a insert incredible thing here, then the answer is probably not. You're probably just trying to flex on everybody. But if you do buy it, and I wonder how many people haven't been car people, have got rich, bought something wonderful, and have then turned around and been like, this is really fun. This is actually really, really fun. Like, this is more fun than a boat. This is way more fun than, whatever other kind of extraneous thing that they're doing. And so I do think it can, obviously being in nice cars can turn you into a car guy. But yeah, as you say, I think a lot of people are car people without realizing it. And it goes, and the spectrum is pretty long there. But just getting back to the EV thing for a second, I also saw an article about that Dodge Challenger concept that they made that was electronic. Incredible looking thing. But they had photos of it with a transmission tunnel. And so that to me says one of two things. Either they're putting a big old motor in that thing and they're going to give you some gears and they're going to give you a transmission tunnel, or, and I don't know if this is me being completely inept with regards to EV, or they're putting gears in the EV. Could that be a thing? Could that be that they're going to give you an EV muscle car with ratios and things like that? And does that change at that point in time how any of us feel about electronic cars with regards to them being just utilities and things like that?
Yeah, enhancing the driver experience with the gearbox to at least give you some variability in the power you're putting down and when and how and where. Absolutely. I mean, I would personally enjoy that more, regardless of how it's powered. Maybe that tunnel's for where they're going to put the speaker that's going to emit the fake gas engine sounds as you drive around.
Just no at that point in time, because I was just milling around town and I did hear some kind of new Audi come past me, and it was completely electric. And they have made them sound electric. They sound like there's some kind of futuristic jets and stuff going on there. But yeah, the idea of trying to mill some kind of V8 rumble out of something that's essentially a Duracell battery, I just don't. I think that's a road to nowhere for people. I honestly do think that's a road to nowhere. But with them maybe putting a transmission tunnel in that Charger, I think it kind of speaks to the fact that they released something that was electric and it did have those speakers. It did make that silly burble. And I wonder if they kind of went, actually, we could just make this car regardless of when the regulations come in. We can actually make this car and it can be fun and we can kind of rock and roll with that. So, yeah, I'm still not convinced on the EV thing. I've yet to drive an EV car. I've actually never, kind of got behind the wheel of one of these things. But for me, they just don't seem to have any kind of draw, even when they look really pretty and they're like a Charger or something. So
I guess I'm stuck in the crossroads, right, of these EVs that look like normal gas-powered motors. Like if I get an EV, I want it to look like something futuristic space. I want it to have an entire glass cocoon cockpit that I'm sitting in and can see all around me and have seats that are fully reclined. You know what I mean? Like, I want that experience. I want to feel like I'm in Oh, I'm gonna blank on the
iRobot is the movie that I go back to whenever I think of an electronic thing. Will Smith's driving that Audi R8 looking thing with the weird ball wheels and things like this, and they're all moving around, and he's not paying any attention. And as you say, he's basically fully reclined.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh no, I can go into driver mode. But do you think that they've been made? I'm of the opinion that a lot of people tried to make an electronic car before they really took off. Mm-hmm. And the reason that they really took off is that they made it look like a regular car, because otherwise it was this like new scary piece of technology that people weren't used to. You know, people didn't really know how to respond to it. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of got your Teslas and your people, and they made it look like a good looking kind of 5 Series kind of thing, that saloon car. And I think as you go forward, they are probably going to make EV cars that are just incredibly luxurious inside, you know, like Rolls Royces and things like that. And I think they're probably going to be the people who are really going to push the envelope with regards to like seats that swivel, and, you know, we can black out everything and it can all be TV screens, or it can, you know, whatever it is. And then you kind of get that future bit, I think, at that point in time.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I'm stuck in the half baked, half between, right? You know, if it's going to be an EV, it needs to be automated. It needs to be a transportation method rather than a driving experience or vehicle in, you know, a loose definition of the word. Have you seen the new Apteras, I think they're called?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, we've got a thread at work for the people that are into cars, and we're headquartered out of San Diego, and they dropped it in. It's a company out of San Diego that have started taking pre-orders for them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that looks like it flies. Does it fly?
Give it 5-10 years maybe. But yeah, no, I thought that, you know, if I'm gonna have an EV, right, that's along the lines of what I want it to look like. And for those that aren't tuned into, you know, YouTube, where you can see what we're looking at, it is by all definitions a futuristic space capsule. I mean, slap some wings on it and you've got yourself a little Cessna, you know, turboprop, whatever. I mean, it literally looks like a super light plane at that point. It's rad. I like it.
Yeah, I honestly would like them to lean into the, hey, this is something different kind of angle, rather than just, this is some kind of transportation thing and this is what we're doing with it. You know, give me all of the future stuff. Like, make it something that genuinely feels like the flip phone versus an iPhone, you know, because some people like a flip phone because it feels nicer and because you're not as bothered and you don't have all your notifications everywhere and things like this. And a lot of people like an iPhone because it does all of these cool, you know, new age things. And I think if electric car companies are really gonna, you know, we're probably gonna see a lot of them in the next 10 years are gonna come out and really start dominating parts of the transportation market. Because I think the enthusiast will always exist. You know, in this, I've used this analogy before, but I think electric cars will do for gasoline powered cars what the car did for the horse, insofar as people will enjoy riding horses, and we didn't kill all the horses, you know, people still enjoy riding them and raising them and looking after them, even though they are, as far as the transportation side of things, useless now because we have so many other things. But I'll be interested to see if people can, in the next 10 years, come out like that Aptera. And it's a solar car. Does it charge off the sun?
That roof charges as you drive.
Which makes so much sense, because then you're not running it on coal. You know, then you're not running it on all of this, you know, fossil fuel kind of argument. And then that makes sense to me as an electronic vehicle. But, you know, just to put a bow on that whole thing, flying batteries from Japan to America to Europe to assemble a car somewhere else, as you say, doesn't really make any sense at that point.
I guess my problem is, you know, this whole dilemma is kind of a unique to the United States type of situation, where being one of the largest carbon emitters, we are trying to say one or the other, and we're not exploring other options like trains, cough cough, like the rest of the world has, right? When we think about the people that aren't into cars, they don't want a car. They don't want a car even if it's an EV. Why are we not investing in public transportation that is more environmentally friendly, that people can hop on and easily segue right over to their next destination, and without killing off the gas-powered vehicles for the enthusiasts that want to drive them, right? We're trying to pass legislations to produce more EVs without fully fleshing out the idea of it being the number one solution. We've kind of just put our thumb down and said, yes, this is absolutely by far the best solution to carbon emissions, without thinking about all the other ways that we could, hash it out. So
you mean to tell me that America hasn't fully thought through something and then it's just cracked on with it? I mean, it's funny because America kind of has this idea of being built on the railroads, and then it was built on motor cars, with all the roads that they've built. And it does make a lot of sense, because if everybody who didn't want to be on the road could be on a good train or could be in some other transport solution, one, it would stop, 90%, I'd wager, of like road rage and all of this mad stuff that goes on the road. It would be a lot safer. And then everybody who actually wanted to be on the road could go and drive at more speed and kind of have more fun with it at that point in time. And so, yeah, man, I mean, I don't think EVs are the incredible solution that, they were kind of pegged as, and are kind of, I guess, still being pegged as, because California can't even charge all of the EVs that they've sold. So at this point in time, what are we doing? But anyway, off of EVs, because we could sit here and fall down a rabbit hole right now. I've got one thumper in the rabbit hole at this point in time. But so I would just say, car customization, is it ever wrong? Is something that somebody does to their vehicle ever wrong? And I'll give you two ends of the spectrum here. One is, Captain Pep Boys, who goes down and grabs everything from a Pep Boys thing, sticks everything shiny on a Toyota Camry, and goes out and runs it around. And the other end of that spectrum is that up until fairly recently, Ferrari would be very, very angry with you for ever customizing any of their cars. They would be like, no, you can't chop them up. You can't do X, Y, and Z. If you did, you'd get cease and desists. So do you ever think that is there a car customization that you see as something that should be just outlawed? Like, you're not allowed to do this anymore?
No, as a blanket statement, no.
Fair.
Where I stand on it, barring any increased danger to the general public, within reason, my stance is, you bought it, you paid for it, you can do whatever you want to it.
Fair. Right?
We talk about liberties and individual personality and everything that we want to.
Is wheels dangerous at this?
In the rain? Probably yes.
Reducing that contact patch to nearly zero. Not that, again, I'm with you on this insofar as I don't think we should outlaw anything. I think, everybody has their own taste, and that's absolutely fine. Obviously, cambering, for those of us who aren't in the car community, cambering is where people take their tires and then angle those tires to such a point whereby they completely, essentially, delete the amount of tire that is touching the road to just a tiny point, and they like the way it looks.
Yeah, negative camber to the inside of the tire.
So there you go.
Yeah, if we're getting technical, and it definitely is dangerous. My current setup on the 540 has tons of negative camber from the previous owner, and those insides of the tires has taken unnecessary wear, and it rains and it's like driving on ice, and that's something that I have to undo because of that. So being safe, that's to the point where you got to know the ramifications of what you're doing to a vehicle at any given point. And when you are not tracking a car where camber is great, if you don't have the adequate suspension stiffness for the car to have little body roll to even roll onto the contact patch, which is what negative camber is designed to do, so that the car shifts its weight onto that tire as it's coming around a corner. All these things that factor in. If you're not driving it and you're not tracking it and it's just for show, weighing the pros and cons of cost to value in terms of, is what I'm doing cool enough to the danger that I'm creating by doing it, right? And I think that goes for anything regardless of the topic, right? I think it's all about thinking critically about the decisions you make and understanding the impact and ramifications from those decisions. So whether it's specific to car customization, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but certainly there are things that people do to their cars that are unsafe, uncalled for. Carolina squat, not a good option, right? When the rear end of a truck is slammed and you're looking at the sky when you're driving around, is probably not the most viable option for safely navigating a road. But that's one where I can say, yes, that is probably something that should be illegal for roads.
If you can't see the road, I think, I would like to caveat this with it being our second episode. Jack and I are great believers in you should be allowed to do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, right?
Yeah, across the board.
I think if you can't see the road, like if you put mirror tint on the inside of your car, like you can't see where you're going. Carolina squat doesn't make any sense because you're staring at the birds rather than staring at, the road that you're on. Yeah, I mean, I always wonder where these things came from. Did somebody one day just only have half of the tools and then did it and somebody else saw it and was like, oh my God, this looks really cool. I really want this on my car.
Yeah, well, how do these things start? How do these things gain traction? It's very curious. Even in the E39, I want to put a brow tint, or not even a brow tint. I just want to put some vinyl on the top for now. Temp fix it. Long term, I want to redo the tints across the car. It needs a new windshield, but not the point. And I want to put a nice solid black piece of vinyl across the top. Now, regulations state that you can put up to 0%, meaning it is opaque. You cannot see through it, down to what's called the AS1 line or AS2 line.
There is a line on your windshield.
It's a little mark on the top of your windshield. That's legal. Anything below that is illegal. But it's very small. And I totally think that you can go slightly below that and still maintain plenty of visibility, unless the fact that I'm, in a semi-truck trailer and I'm navigating under bridges and I need to see above, to see my clearance, right? There's certain instances, but I'm in a car that's already lower than my shoulder when I stand next to it.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to be above me that I need to navigate, especially when we're talking millimeters below that AS1 line.
Yeah, just for pure aesthetics. Underneath a truck. You're not going to need to figure out where the roof line is and going under.
Right. So again, it all comes back to understanding your circumstances, the situation, and is what you're doing going to have an impact that negatively affects your ability to safely navigate and maneuver your vehicle. So,
yeah, totally fair.
That's my stance.
So the answer to is car customization ever wrong is no, but maybe. Every so often is basically how I stand.
Yep. Are you going to potentially kill yourself or someone else? Reconsider.
I think that speaks to a wider thing within a car, because I do always have the thought. Obviously, all of us like driving, and we like driving quite quickly every so often. And I do always have the thought before I'm about to do it: is this stupid? Do you know what I mean? Like, is what I'm about to do stupid? Or is it in line with, kind of the road conditions, whether or not anybody's there, whether or not I know this piece of road, whether or not there's a school within a mile and a half? Do you know what I mean? Like any of these things. And I do think that is something that occasionally gets lost on people, whereby I'm like, there are smart ways to do dumb things. And I think, there are smart ways to camber your car. There are smart ways to tint your car. There are smart ways to do all of these things. There are also extremely dumb ways of doing it, which ends up with you sliding off the road because you thought you looked cool. But absolutely nobody looks cool in a ditch unless you are a rally driver, right?
At which point, we can let it slide. Puns definitely intended, but yeah,
let it slide.
You've got enough to be a rally driver. You've had enough to the good to offset the times that you end up in the ditch. Yeah.
Yeah, which is totally fair, which kind of brings me on to my next one. Rally. So for those of us in America, rally kind of hasn't punctured the zeitgeist here. It just isn't something that I ever really hear Americans talk about as a motorsport, you know? Mm-hmm. And for those of us who don't know, rally is basically where you go out into the woods with an incredibly powerful car and you run that car from point A to point B through the woods with essentially no safety barriers, through the woods, and whoever goes fastest wins. I think that's probably a pretty fair. And in England and in Europe, that is incredible. It's a really grassroots. You can go out, you can stand basically on the track, and you can stand and you can watch these cars fly past. But in America, much to, I imagine, Travis Pastrana and rest in peace, the late great Ken Block, it's just never really got into American kind of psyches. I mean, as somebody who, you know, has grown up here their entire life and all that, what do you think that is? What do you think rally's missing to really kind of capture people?
Yeah, and it kind of brings me back to those that didn't listen to the first podcast and are just now tuning in on why, you know, I have an affinity for IndyCar and why as a spectator it's a great sport to watch is simply because it's easy for me to go to these events. And, you know, to your point, we don't have a whole host of rally events that are easily accessible to us in the United States. I'm sure plenty of rally races out there, but in terms of the greats that, you know, are really going to stoke a fire to create a passion for watching and following the sport, I just don't think that exists. And to add to that, because of the lack of the events hosted here locally, it's really hard to find them and watch them, right? Whenever I hear of, you know, some big rally races, I'm going to different web browsers and sites trying to figure out which ones are hosting it. It's not an easy task for me to simply throw on channel 13 and see a rally event going on, or even, you know, ESPN getting highlights. It doesn't get the broadcast time. And because of that, it doesn't stoke a fan base. It doesn't create that. It doesn't foster it. And so it lacks everything, you know, whether they're correlative or causative. You know, maybe not having the races here is why we don't broadcast them, or because the interest isn't there, we don't broadcast them, right? It's hard to say. But I think it's across many different facets of not making it readily and easily available for folks to get involved in it here in the States. So.
Yep. I think that all makes sense. I would give two extra things to that. I would say, one, it's incredibly exciting if you know what they're doing. If you don't know what they're doing, they are just going chung, and that's it. That's the only time you see the car. You know, you're like, oh, and then you go on the onboard, and the onboard, for anybody who doesn't just really enjoy watching onboards, which is me, I just love it. I'll sit and watch onboards all day long if I can. But it's almost like motion sickness inducing. Like, they are going so fast. There is so much going on that instead of it just being on a track where you've got like runoff and things like this, you're like claustrophobic in this tiny little car that's making loads of noise. There's some guy sitting next to the guy who's doing the driving, just reading off random numbers and things like this. And it's you know, it's quite technical the way that they do their pace notes. And I think just it doesn't broadcast well. So to your point of not knowing where to go and see one live, which is always the best way to go see something, it also doesn't translate on TV. You know, so at that point in time, you either kind of know about it or you don't. And if you do, and you know the minutiae of it, like with anything, then it becomes incredibly interesting. And it is incredibly dangerous. I mean, I would say, as far as crashes, if that's what you're into, if you're listening to this,
go watch some rally.
And you are a diehard like NASCAR, and people say, why do you watch NASCAR? And they're like, I just love when these cars pile up. Like, I'm not a sadist. I'm not like, you know, I just love watching that. There's something about that is incredibly interesting. Go watch some rally. and go watch just a compilation of like top 50 rally crashes. And I would I would say they also have an incredible survival walk away.
It's crazy.
Because the cars are built like they are meant to be shot out of a cannon. You know, they are.
It's insane.
They'll roll like 10, 15 times down a hill, and the two guys will get out and just be like, that was a big one. And
yeah,
they
walk off and go about it. Yeah, it's nuts.
But yeah, I do think it is the coolest thing that nobody watches in motorsport. I don't even watch it. We're literally on a podcast about cars and everything. I don't even watch it. But every time I catch a glimpse of it, I'm like, oh wow, I should probably watch it.
You know what would really transform the sport in terms of a spectator base is, one, having a broadcaster table of folks that comment on run versus run, of what someone did well and what someone didn't do well by the specific turn or what have you, so that the spectators get an understanding of the course itself and what good looks like, to be able to call out and highlight like, oh, he killed that, right? Like that was a perfect turn or executed.
Killed that, yeah.
Or okay, this could have been done better, to really explain better to the layperson that's watching. But on top of that, with the evolution of drones, how cool would it be to have an FPV chase drone for each car? And so you're not
even do this. They might even do the drone thing.
Yeah, and maybe we're out of the loop, but I would sure love to see an FPV close behind, almost at the same level the car's at.
Like that third person car.
Yeah, because the car can whip, sideways while the drone stays straight, so you wouldn't get that motion sickness from the onboard per se, but it wouldn't leave out all the action and kicking up the gravel and rocks and dust and, all of that part of it. So I would sure love to watch some rally races with some FPV.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna email them right now.
Yeah.
Just came up with this idea, and they're gonna be like, yeah, we've been doing that for a couple of years, you just haven't been watching.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go, damn it. But yeah, no, I think it's very cool, and it's given us some of the great motorsport people who have actually transcended rally. Like, I think a lot of people will probably, I would like to think, know who like Colin McRae is. They know that name, and that's probably because he had the rally games, on PlayStation, on whatever, and he kind of transcended. There's a couple of other people, Carlos Sainz Senior has kind of transcended that. There's a lot of people who've come out of it, but a lot of people are just like, what do you do? They're like, this is what I do. Looks insane.
And what rally's done for the car community. I mean, look at what it's done for Subaru and Audi with the Quattro and the 22B, and really, like, I mean, though I can't say that those car manufacturers wouldn't be around, but they sure as hell wouldn't be what they are today without the sport.
Subaru would never have sold as many Imprezas as they did without Colin McRae in that blue and yellow, like, liveried Subaru Impreza sliding that thing around. It just wouldn't have happened. And like the Impreza Evo kind of, back and forth, that was back and forth on a rally stage. That, it wasn't back and forth on a street race or whatever like that. It was back and forth on the rally stages around the world. And that's the reason that those cars exist. And I do wonder how many people who are currently driving around in WRXs and STIs and things like that actually know kind of where that whole thing came from. Do they just think it's a cool trim level that, burbles a bit more and, has some big fat wings and kind of looks cool? Or do they know kind of the lineage of that? And obviously you don't have to know the complete lineage of a car to enjoy it. But yeah, there's been a lot of things that have been birthed out of rally, and which is kind of why it blows me away that more people don't watch it. It doesn't have a bigger.
And I know we've seen clips and snippets, and we get our daily feed of, at least some portion of rally throughout our, busy, chaotic social media feeds of all car stuff. Yeah. Crazy what kind of cars they're running now, like Yaris's and Corolla, like hatchbacks and Fiat. Yeah, it's you would not look at that and be like, oh, that's the prime candidate for a rally car, but.
Well, the newest one that came out of that was that new Corolla GR thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually saw one in the flesh the other day, tooling around. And that is a cool little car. I mean, I'm a sucker for a hot hatch. I'll put my hands up here. I'm
Yeah.
a sucker for a
Hot
hot hatch.
hatches are cool.
But I think they're cool cars, and they just kind of made that car off of the back of a rally car. And as you say, all of the cars that they're running, they're not like Ferraris and Lamborghinis or anything. They're grocery getters that they've just put giant great turbos on and gone, go slide that thing around for a little bit and go give it a go. So yeah, very cool. Very, very cool and insane to watch. It does give me sweaty palms watching rally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The only thing that gives me more sweaty palms is the Isle of Man TT, but we're not going to jump into that right now. But those two things are the ones that I'm like, you literally can't make this any safer than it already is, and it's incredibly dangerous. So
yeah. When you're driving by, listening to the call outs of the co-pilot rather than necessarily eyes on the road, you're turning before you see the turn. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's something. Somebody should do some kind of study on like what the situation,
the psyche of a person that
works.
Yeah.
Because I have to be seeing, you can come out of a corner not quite seeing the exit, but like going into a corner and you're already setting up for the next one mentally, with your co-pilot and things is kind of crazy. So yeah, they're kind of heroes. I just love it. I think it's cool. I'm glad that it still exists. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
All
right.
Gordon.
What else we got?
What else we got? So before my voice completely dies a death, what are the films, if you give me like 3 films, that you think shaped your kind of early days of car culture, enjoyment? Did you have anything that you watched and you were like, oh my God, this bit in this film, was really great and I really loved it? Was there anything, that you rewatched as a child and you were like, oh, this is just absolutely incredible?
Yeah, I mean, the easy ones are the Fast and Furious. Being a 90s kid, right? I think that those are the greatest, right? Up until 3 or 4, I mean, Tokyo Drift, I lose track of all of them, It became repetitive, but those OG Fast and Furiouses were on repeat as a kid.
Yeah.
And all the different car customization, kind of staying on the topic of today's podcast.
Sure.
I mean, talk about shedding light on what's possible and having your personality shine through cars. I mean, fantastic, right?
Yeah.
All the characters, their cars match the characters to a T. And I think that's something that gets overlooked of how much thought was put into the cars and what they were to look like and the characters based around that specific car. I mean, that was intentional and that was purposeful and it carried a lot of weight. But whenever I hear this, I really think about a movie that's not maybe viewed as a car movie per se. But one of my favorite scenes from all time was The Italian Job.
Yeah.
When they have to figure out how to transport the gold through this building and through these train tracks, and the Mini Cooper has the wheelbase and size to make it through there. Yeah. But they have to determine how to offset suspension for the weight of the gold, and they're customizing them, and and then they're actually driving them through the the sewers, the tunnels, and they're doing all this crazy stuff, and then they're into the the washout, whatever you call it, sewer.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just that. I mean,
it's one of the greatest car chases of all time. It is one of the greatest cars. Those 3 minis, I think it was Turin in Italy that they were trying to get out of early. Mm-hmm. And they're all 3 of those minis, are just whipping around. And I think that's one of those things where a car chase doesn't have to be the biggest, fastest, scariest situation to be incredibly interesting, because they're driving those little minis through like the piazza, and just kind of like hopping upstairs and things like this in them. And it's kind of, it's not just all about big slides and doing wheelies and things.
Right.
Like that.
Not some high horsepower muscle car that's, kitted out or whatever. Yeah, no, it's great. I love that. How about
you? The one that jumps out to me, and this is one of my favorite films, full stop in story. But the one that jumps out to me as a child that I remember watching and being like, oh my God, that's so cool, is the car chase scene in the movie The Rock with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery. I'll spare you the long of it, but basically Sean Connery is a convict. He's escaped. Nick Cage is the FBI agent trying to get him. Sean Connery runs out of a hotel in San Francisco and steals a dude's H1 Hummer. And he steals it and he starts driving it through the streets of San Francisco. Nicolas Cage comes out and a guy is parking a yellow Ferrari 355 and he jumps into the Ferrari 355 and then there is a chase scene through San Francisco with a bunch of police cars and stuff. But this yellow Ferrari 355 is chasing this Hummer. And I can hear the music in my head. I can hear the way he changes down at certain things. Like it was what I think it was a Jerry Bruckheimer film. So the same dude who did Gone in 60 Seconds, which is another one of those films.
That was the one I thought you were going to say, because I don't know how many times you brought that up, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, the one that like jumps out at me is that yellow Ferrari 355 in The Rock. That's an incredible film. If you haven't seen it, go see it. And so obviously, but then there is Gone in 60 Seconds. There is a little bit of a Nick Cage kind of scenario going on.
I was going to say, yeah. I'm sure if you're setting yourself up for round two, but
yeah, exactly. But I mean, Gone in 60 Seconds, obviously, I think one of the greatest car films ever made. Because it's cool, and I rewatched it the other day, and it's still good. It's still cool. The car torque and everything still stands up. And obviously you've got the Shelby GT500 at the end, aka Eleanor, which back to our what one car would you have? If I had to have one car that I was actually going to drive and one car that you can turn up everywhere in, it might be an Eleanor GT500. You can turn up to the black tie gala with Bugattis and everything sitting around, and that thing is still going to turn heads. And you can turn up to the little league baseball, whatever, soccer practice game, and everybody's gonna go, wow, that's kind of that thing's cool. It's a cool car. So for me, The Rock, Gone in 60 Seconds. There was a little known film that I put somebody onto the other day. I think it's called Driven, and it's got Sly Stallone in it, and he is a Indy car driver or a Formula One driver. And there is a chase scene in that whereby he is on the streets in an Indy car and he's like driving all crazy and things like that. So I'd say, yeah, they were like The Rock and Gone in 60 Seconds, really like the early ones for me, where I was like, oh, this is incredible. I already knew that I loved cars, but they're the ones that stick out in my mind, at least.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was definitely a fully fledged car person by the time this came out, but the Ford vs. Ferrari movie was great. In terms of a modern movie that pays tribute to the history of cars and the competitiveness and everything that went on at Le Mans, right? Just fantastic. I just think they did such a good job with that movie.
Yeah, I think that was one of those. I've had a lot of non-car people come up to me and be like, have you seen Ford versus Ferrari?
Right. They were like, oh, we have something to talk about. Let's get into it.
I'm like, yes. And the funny thing is I suppose this is the car guy's version of I've read the book. Is I was like, yeah, I actually kind of knew about that whole thing before anybody even talked about not, like making a movie about it. And it was one of those things where, when people are like, oh, I read the book and the book was better or whatever. I was really quite nervous before that film came out because I was like, please don't mess this up.
Yeah, don't ruin it.
I was like, this is a big chance for everybody to learn about my favorite race in the world, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And you've got this incredible story of these two guys who basically just had giant egos and really went to war on a racetrack for the best part of a decade. And I thought they did a great job. Christian Bale is incredible in it. I think everybody's incredible in it. Matt Damon played a great role. But yeah, I think they did a really good job of like humanizing that, because it could have just been, I would have watched it if it was just the race. If they just recreated the race, I would have watched it. But yeah, I thought they did a great job with that. I thought that was really, really, really top notch. Is there anything you've seen recently that you thought, as a car guy, oh, I actually like this is this kind of surprised me, or this is because every film now has a car chase in it, and like I'm kind of cashed on Hollywood car chases now. You know, I'm just like, I'll be sitting there and I'll just be like, this is boring. Like, this is boring to me. I'm not, you know, I know that the guy's going to get away or whatever it is. But has anything surprised you recently that you've seen?
Honestly, no. Nothing enough to come to my mind and be like, yeah, that was a good car scene or chase scene or anything like that. No, it's always one car being chased by 3 black cars of the same make and model with guys with mini, you know, submachine guns hanging out the window. I mean, it's the formula has been just suffocated.
Well, I think there is something to be said, because there is so this isn't a film. Well, it is a film, but it's not like a Hollywood film. There's a film, and it was filmed by a French guy, and I believe it's called Rendezvous. And it is him driving some kind of old Ferrari through the streets of Paris, but the camera is on the front of the Ferrari. And this was filmed in, I'm probably butchering all of this, but it was filmed in like the 60s or the 70s. And it's like 10-20 minutes of this guy just absolutely wringing the neck of this thing, going through the streets and all of this. And I think what's got lost now with like modern car chases is, as you say, it's just formulaic. It's, you're going to slide this car here, this thing's going to explode, this guy's going to go here, bada, bada, bada. Like, you know, there's going to be, somebody's going to be in distress here and you're going to avoid them and like whatever it is. And I think that there's a lot of space, I think, in Hollywood car chases to make it a bit more like, I hate the word gritty, but like real. And kind of like, hey, these are people that are kind of going through like little streets and I don't know, but I think there's a lot of unused potential within car chases, because as you say, I haven't seen anything that was made in the past 10 years that has had a car chase where I've gone, oh my god, this is incredible, apart from Ford versus Ferrari, which I thought they did an unbelievable job showing the way that those cars were crashing and things like that, and all of that going on.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it, right? You talk about like the winding roads and driver skill, and it really just coming down to a chase and outmaneuvering, right? It doesn't have to be the highest speed, it doesn't have to be the craziest. It's all about maneuvering, you know, tight turns to get away. Not every car has to roll off a cliff or explode, even if it just slides out the outside of a turn and hits a tree. Yeah, and that engine's toast, like they're dead in the water, right? They can keep moving. It doesn't need to be some theatrical, grand, you know, event for it to be a realistic, fun experience. So yeah, I agree.
It made me think. Actually, there is one thing coming out which might nail this. They're making an Initial D.
Yes.
Live with the guy out of. Was it Too Fast, Too Furious? Was it Tokyo Drift? I think it was Tokyo Drift
yeah.
First arrived. And that is going to be amazing. It's going to be
he's directing it.
Yeah. So maybe we'll get what we want there. Maybe. Who knows? Hopefully. I mean, that's got to be Japan, Toog, drifting down those winding lanes, as you say, driver skill, things like that. Maybe that's the one.
Yeah, it's kind of curious how, I guess, long it maybe has taken for Initial D to make it to having a live action movie or really becoming a mainstream topic. And I don't know whether the craze of, you know, anime now in the States is driving this. Because you would have thought with the way car culture has kind of somewhat stagnated in a lot of ways, that things like Initial D that were just a very small minor speck, you know, of what really sparked someone's interest in a certain style of car and drifting and the Japanese car culture, to now blowing up to this live action big movie, gathering lots of funding. It's curious because it was kind of one of those things for a long time. Like, if you know, you know, if you don't, then forget about it. Right.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be curious to see.
Yeah. I think there's probably, I mean, for me, I haven't watched all of Initial D. I'll be honest. I'll put my hands up there. But for me, there was a thing where it was like, it's just cartoon cars drifting around, and it felt. And I am not the biggest, anime fan or anything like that, but it just kind of felt like there was nothing really on the line. Like, you can draw a car going around a corner at 5,000 miles an hour. If the car comes off the corner, what have you lost? A drawing. But then I did watch it, and I did watch like quite a lot of it, and it's obviously made by car guys. It's all car guys and girls. It's made by this whole situation of them moving those cars around is so beautifully, like, it's like a ballet the way they do it. Yeah. And I am glad that it is now getting the attention that it deserves, because if someone can put that into actually happening, which obviously it does happen, people do it. That was what Initial D was based on. If somebody can put that into live action, I will watch that on repeat quite happily.
Yeah. One of the biggest things with Initial D is kind of the Karate Kid in ways where a lot of it's rooted in the story and the foundations. I think about wax on, wax off, and in Initial D, it's like he makes it back and he's like, oh, I did it in this fast.
Every time.
And he had spilled all the soup, right? Yeah. And he's like, now do it without spilling a drop of soup. And just some of those like foundational things of struggling and driving home the fail until you're successful, which I think people think they can jump in a car and drive it, because their egos are big, until they realize there's a lot of skill that's involved. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons from Initial D and that sort of mentality. So
I think there's that kind of goes down to, there are a lot of ways to drive fast. There's only a couple of ways to do it well. It is that, hey, you spilled the soup. Like, yeah, you were quick, you were super quick, but you were unsettled the entire time. It was all dangerous. It was all kind of crazy. And that, the one that rings in my ears is the slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so yeah, but
I think that's a great stopping point. I think maybe next podcast we could do most common misconceptions about what it means to drive well and what that looks like. I think that there's a lot to be said there, and could be an entire episode just on what that looks like, how to drive.
That could be the one. And then hopefully by that point in time I won't sound like I'm talking through sandpaper, which would be lovely. So yeah, well, it's always a pleasure, my friend.
Likewise. Yeah, we'll appreciate you. Subscribe, tune in. I hope to see you guys on more of these episodes.
I always forget that we're actually doing this for anybody.
Yeah, no,
we're supposed to tell people that they're supposed to be doing something here.
That we're not just talking on the phone, on FaceTime. Yeah. No, seriously though, for those tuning in, reach out to us, or those on YouTube, leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you guys want to see more of, hear more of, what have you. Because we're all learning. We're all just having a conversation, having a good time, and hope to keep doing more of it.
That's the deal.
Awesome.